Hi, this is Martin Drummond with Progressive News. It's Friday, April 26, 2019. And today I just want to send a message out to my fellow pundits, and that is, when you're trying to explain things like that are negative against you, against your opinion, just go for the throat. Don't mess around. Don't go to your second best or your third best choice. Just go for the throat. Like in this instance, you've got Mike Figueredo, one of my favorite. He is my favorite. I was going to say one of my favorites, but he's my favorite pundit, political editorialist, I guess, opinion pundits. And he talks about why, well, here, I'll let you hear it.
Numerous women, he brushed it off by joking about it. I mean, this is someone who is so far removed from the needs of the Democratic Party's base that I just don't see, I can't fathom how he'd be successful. Now, of course, there's the argument, Mike, he's polling ahead, even of Bernie in some polls, but what I really think that is derivative of it is just the mere fact that people view the Obama era as an era of stability, as an era that was
No, Mike. That's not what it's a derivative of. What it's a derivative of is this bullshit polling that goes on. I mean, we've touched on it a million times in the past in different stories. People talking about how, they only called people with landlines. When it turned out, you looked at the polling, it was only people over 45, and there's just a million reasons why polling is bullshit in the United States, and the main reason is, and I'll just say this because I know it'll be controversial, but the main reason is because the pollsters know that it's skewed. They know it's biased. They know that it's going to hit a certain demographic. So, Mike, when you're talking about what appears to be a weakness like polling that doesn't favor Bernie Sanders, why don't you just point to the obvious, and that's that he look at his rallies. I mean, he brings in, who knows how many people he could bring in if he really wanted to. He doesn't even try. He just puts his name out there and says he's going to be in a certain place, and all these people show up. How about the fact that he's even in some, I'm going to use one poll against another, because why not? Because if one poll shows better than the other, maybe they did a better job of polling than the bullshit polls that you obviously looked at on Bernie and or Biden. I mean, there's polls that show for the last 2 years, 3 years, we've been hearing about these polls saying Bernie is the most popular politician, period, in America. Not just in the Senate, not just in the Democrats, not just in independents, not just in the House, just period. Just the most popular. And why? Why? Because he's spending a lot of time thinking about things and studying things, and he's come to the right conclusions. For instance, about I saw somebody else, I think it was probably, I don't know. Could have been Kyle, could have been David Dole, but talking about, why he supports giving people who committed heinous crimes the right to vote from prison. And he said it just straight out, and it makes perfect sense to me. aside from the fact that I understand the prison population, and I know that 99% of them probably should have more of a right to vote than the people on the outside, you know? Although you're horribly politicized and propagandized in jail and prisons in this country, in detention centers. All you get to watch is local TV, and a lot of the prisoners in there are very right-wing, and they do what right-wingers do. They control the TV. So, you know, when you're sitting in jail, all you watch is MSM, mainstream media, lamestream media, and 90% of it is nonsense. And the rest of the people who don't really feel like watching it don't have any choice. Because what are you going to do? Start a fight over it? And you're going to end up losing all your good time? You know, everybody should spend some, you know, my dad used to say everybody should spend some time in the military. Nonsense. Well, I'll say the same thing. Everybody should spend some time in jail in the United States. And no, I don't think everybody should. But I think that it's a enlightening experience, believe me. I mean, once you understand that the people in jail, 95%, 99% of the people that I met in jail were there because they went up against the system. They decided that they're going to try and steal rather than go in there and suck their boss's dick again, you know, or they decided that they're just going to dope out and flee the. I mean, these are things that people do. Like when you talk about a suicide bomber, nobody stops and asks themselves. I mean, all they want to do is scream, "He's a horrible person. He strapped a bomb on himself and killed all kinds of innocent people." But what kind of, I mean, that's, despite the misguidedness of it all and the terrorism of it all, it's also like the ultimate act of bravery, right? So people don't want to look at both sides. And I'm not saying, I'm not in any way supporting terrorism. What I'm supporting is understanding those people. Understanding people in jail. Anyway, I got off the point. The point was that people in jail are propagandized, and that's going to skew polls too, and public opinion. And the polls are going to be skewed anyway. I mean, they got nothing to do with people in prison. But you know, Bernie, I'm saying Bernie's right from my opinion of my experience in jail. That people in jail, you know, their vote is just as valid as anybody else's, just because they made a huge mistake. And you know, the worse we treat those people, the worse they're going to be when they get out. So I'm not really talking about the people. And all that the enemy wants to do, the Republicans, the establishment Democrats, all they want to do is pick at exceptions to the rule, right? So maybe somebody who did something really horrible, maybe they shouldn't have the right to vote, but not because they did that horrible thing. But, you know, Bernie, here's a message for you, as long as I'm sending messages. You should look at those exceptions to the rules. For instance, so you got somebody who, you know, raped babies and murdered them or something horrible, right? Maybe what you should do, Bernie, is say, well, as part of the legal system, the right to vote should maybe have certain limits, just like everything else has limits, right? And I say make it a legal limit. So if you're insane, maybe you lose your right to vote. I mean, people in insane asylums are not allowed to vote, are they? Or are they? Well, there's a question right there, huh? I don't know. Let's try Googling it. So, yeah, I got a problem here. I can't get to my... Okay, so we'll Google this and see what it says. So it just has our insane people allowed to vote. Know your rights. Okay, so if you're insane, you're not allowed to vote. So, of course, if you're adjudicated as insane, you're not sent to prison either. So these people would be sitting. So if you want to say, so what I would say to these people if I were Bernie is, well, if what you're saying is what they did was so heinous that it says that they're insane, then find them insane and send them to an insane asylum for life. You can send them to an insane asylum for life, or you can send them to an insane asylum until somebody decides whether they're sane again. And that way you'll take away their right to vote until they're sane again. You know, and I mean, I have the same issue with giving money to black people who were descendants of slaves. You know, I'm not against it, and I don't think Bernie should be against it. I mean, I'm against it, and Bernie should be against it in the idea of just handing out money as the President of the United States. Because they're like saying, because it's like black people are saying, well, you tell me now that you'll hand me a wad of cash and I'll vote for you. That's buying people's votes. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen all the time, but it's not a good thing to do, and it's not a good way to get elected. And what I would say to black people and Indians, especially Indians, because we did a lot worse than make them slaves, and we probably did enslave a lot of them. How many people, how many black or Indian slaves, Confederates? No. Will this do it? Okay, well, oh, that's interesting. So I say no. I say no. You don't, and I say all this allowing the president to legislate, allowing him to make laws, is bullshit, man. He's one guy. And just because everybody in America voted for him doesn't mean that he should be able to, like, change the laws of the, you know, that's like monarchy or imperialism, you know, an emperor kind of deal. And we don't, that's not what we have in our country. Huh, that's an interesting little article there, isn't it? So I say what you do as far as reparations is you say, well, as president, I'm not going to give anybody money. I'm not going to arrange for that. What I will do is try to reform the judiciary, because that's the third branch of government, to make it possible for blacks to get, and anybody, to get a fair trial on what they can prove was done to their family in the past. So like, let's say I'm white, right? Let's say I can prove that one of my Irish American ancestors or Scottish American ancestors came over under a under one of those contracts, right, where indentured servants, and then the owner imprisoned that person and forced them to be a slave for the rest of their life. So, why can't I, and this gets into, let's be honest about it, and let's make our judges honest and our jurors honest. Big problem in this country. Jurists are intentionally stupid and biased. They're right-wing, they're fascist, they just want to see people pay a horrible price, whether they're guilty or not. That's what happened to me. I spent 3 months in jail just because there was a right-wing jury and they didn't like the fact that I wasn't guilty. I didn't actually threaten anybody. I didn't threaten to blow up a building or shoot people, which is what they put me in jail for. They put me in jail for that. I never did it. Okay? I just expressed my opinion to my car cam. And they happened to be recording it over my cell phone when I thought I was on hold. And I was just talking to myself from my show, which I talk just like I'm talking to you right now. And they took that and threw me in jail because they didn't like my politics. And they just used the fact that they had the recording. And they knew they could get a right-wing jury and to throw me in jail just because they wanted to hurt me. They didn't, because, well, I'll explain that. You can look at my past recordings to understand that stuff. So I believe in reforming the justice system. I mean, we've got huge problems with the justice system, as I just mentioned, what they did to me. And so we reform it. Now, do I say that you can, that there's no statute of limitations? Because now we're saying, well, if you want to legalize reparations, then what you're trying to legalize is family history being used as proof of a crime. So you're going to have to say that it's a person now because they have the money from their ancestors, and that maybe that money was used to balloon, and their money and their family has a history of making money off of inheritance and all that, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to try to rationalize the whole thing right here and now for you, but what I'm saying is we reform our judiciary based on logic and reason, and say, when you can, when you can't hit somebody in the pocketbook for what their family did years and years ago. And I don't think that you should be allowed to ruin somebody. If they've got $50 million in the bank and their family, say, was in the plantation business or the slave trade business or something, and you shouldn't be able to take, all their money and make them destitute. But like I'm saying, all those things should be worked out by legal experts who aren't idiots, because most legal experts I know are idiots. There's only a few that I've run across, like Papantonio and RFK. A few of them have an idea of what, because justice it's got nothing to do with the legal system. It's got to do with just, common sense really is what it would have to do with if we had a real justice system. We don't. We have a mass injustice system, as I saw one of the videos called recently. So, like Bernie likes to say, no, I'm against reparations. Well, yeah, he should say he's against reparations, but what he's for is reforming the legal system to address reparations, to address the economic disparity, of the past. So, you could be for it and against it at the same time. You could be for it in a certain framework and against it in another framework. Against it in the framework of just handing money to black people to get their vote, and for it in a legal framework where courts were fair, which is the hard part of that, and would hand people money based on eligibility, right? So, what I'm saying to you guys, you pundits, is, go for the throat on these issues. Don't hold back. Don't say, don't give them any credibility. I don't give any of the polls that say Biden is ahead any credibility, because Biden's a guy who became president without being elected. They elected Obama because, and I hate to say this now because, I'm with you, Mike. I voted for Obama both times too. As a matter of fact, my 2 times in my whole life that I voted, other than voting for Bernie in the primaries, I guess, I voted 3 times, were for Obama. And I stumped for him, and I went door to door, and I handed out flyers, and I did all that. So, I'm with you. Very disappointed in what we found out. I pretty much learned about establishment Democrats, about my party. I learned, from that, it inspired me to research it, and I found out about the Democratic Leadership Council. I found about the coup in 1992 when Clinton ran for president, that took over my party, and I began the war on the internet, on Facebook, right here. I mean, at this point now, the group is it's called We the People, and it's just regular kind of stuff. But when it started out back in 2013, 14, they were already saying, Hillary was anointed, and I named her Shillery, and I named the group Shillery, the scourge of the fake Democratic Party, fake in quotes or parentheses or something, and started the revolution. Because what we did was we started demanding other candidates. There were no other candidates. Nobody bothered to go up, and we courted Warren, and she refused. And when she decided not to back Bernie, we noticed, That's why we don't support her now, and that's why she won't be the nominee, no matter how hard she tries. And we really think it's despicable that she is trying so hard to beat Bernie. Nobody's more electable than Bernie. Nobody has the poll numbers against Trump like Bernie has, because Republicans love him. Because Republicans do support most of the social policies of the progressive movement. They understand the progressives. They understand what we're doing. They understand that it's not some kind of weakness to feel sorry for minorities and poor people in this country, mainly poor people. I mean, progressives are like Bernie, or Bernie's like progressives. It doesn't matter how personally, I think Bernie personally is farther to the left than progressives. Progressives don't look at poverty, I mean, in black and white and brown and red and yellow. We look at poverty as poverty. We don't care what color you are if you're poor. We want to help you. We consider it American to do so. So anyway, Mike, Kyle, David Dole, the Rational National, the Humanist Report here, the secular, can't remember exactly. It's not the Secular Report. Anyway, you guys, don't cave, man. Don't cave on the, don't take them seriously. Don't take these claims. Don't take these polls. Don't take these claims. Don't ever take them seriously. Go immediately to why they're bullshit. And don't give them any credence.
Scandal free. Now, that's not necessarily the reality, but when you juxtapose Obama's legacy with Trump, of course Obama is preferable, so people think of Biden as the good old days with Obama. But I think that the more he speaks, they'll be reminded that this is someone who...
Yeah, but we've discovered that that Obama was a corporatist, that Obama surrounded himself with Wall Street people. I mean, look at them. They're always dressing so nice. I'd like to see even Bernie. I made a nice where he was lined up with all the other presidential candidates at the Democratic debates, and I put him in a T-shirt and a Bernie T-shirt and a pair of Levi's and or a pair of jeans and some tennis shoes, because I was like, that's the way. I'd vote for that guy. He shows up at the Democratic debates. He's not wearing a suit and tie like these idiots here. You know what? This thing they call a tie, it's a noose. It's a leash. It's a collar and a leash. And it says, I serve, in these cases, I serve money. I serve money. I don't serve people. I serve paper with pictures of ex-presidents on it. That's all it is. So, this is all nonsense. That's like I tell people, grow your hair, man. Don't fucking shave your head. Don't fucking wear a crew cut or anything like that, because hair is a message. It's a symbol. It's that's what the hippies, why they grew their hair long. Not because they cared about how they looked. I happen to like long hair on a guy. I think it looks good. I think a guy looks good with long hair or a beard or whatever. I don't mind any kind of facial. But it was a message, because and conservatives hated it. The first couple of times I tried to grow my hair as a kid, my dad was come in and he'd tell my mom, you take him and get a haircut today. And yeah, I used to have to get a haircut. Eventually that all changed. Eventually my refusal to cut my hair, and the fact that my dad realized that, most of the kids, they didn't go for his military attitude or his haircuts, and I think he felt like he couldn't really, in all fairness. And plus, I'm sure that everybody who's conservative understands how fucked up they are at some level, and they start letting progressives and people like me live our lives. And as I got older, of course, it becomes harder and harder to tell a kid not to believe in what's right. I spend my whole life growing up hearing about how in America there was justice, and how in America there was the freedom to express yourself, and all these things. And of course, as I grew up, I found out that was all bullshit, right? Oh yeah, you have the freedom to express yourself if you don't mind being crushed by conservatives all around you. You know, when I was in Indonesia, I used to talk to this guy. He was a CIA asset. He was Chinese, but he was Indonesian Chinese. He was Indonesian, but he was part of the Chinese who had lived in Indonesia for generations. But he'd also lived in China. And he told me that while he was in China, the worst thing that they used to do to people who weren't communist is they'd ask you to sit down with 5 communists in a room, and he said those communists would browbeat you. Well, that's the worst thing that they used to do, and I don't even know if that had... I think he just heard that from somebody else. But my point is that happened to me over and over and over and again. I mean, so many of my people, my friends, I tried to be friends with, but they would give me such hell over supporting Cuba, over saying, well, I support Cuba. I think that they did the right thing keeping America out. I think that communism is a better government for the Cuban people than if Batista had stayed on and the mafia and America's establishment had run Cuba as a, a place for rich guys to go get laid and gamble and drink at the expense of all the Cuban people, of course. So, well, I've gotten off track here and lost my train of thought, but so that's it. I think I've said plenty. I think whatever I was talking about, I think you can follow the line back to what I was talking about. I mean, I know what I was talking about. I know I was talking about not caving into conservatives and their mainstream media, their lies, their polls and stuff, and by all means, don't do that, man. And as people who watch these shows, don't do that. Don't let, love you, Mike, but don't let Mike confuse you on this. Don't let him make you think that there really is a poll that puts Biden in the lead, because there isn't. Not a legitimate poll. Okay? Trust me. We'll tell you one thing I was thinking about this morning is that, I'm not running for president. All I'm doing is, here's a little bit of info about my show. My show simply exists because I love the news. So every day I love to get the news. Who's killing who where, and who's blowing up who, and who's shooting who, and who's trying to do something about it, and all that stuff. I mean, I find human beings fascinating. What I really love is how good they can be. And I guess I love the news because I get to find out, where people stand. How are the good people starting to win yet? That's what the progressive movement is all about. Good people starting to win and take over and run things, because that'll make this a better world. So I found out that I love watching it. And when I'd watch it, I found out, gosh, I have opinions on it. And because of my massive amount of information, because I watch all these different shows, and and I have a good sense of picking out stuff to watch. So I'm picking out good information. I'm grabbing good information. I used to get it off of all these different news sites. Now I usually go to Pundits, because what Pundits do is they pull the good stuff out of those good information outlets, and then they give their opinion, and that can help me form an opinion. So I've been doing this, and then I get on the internet and I contact my friends who I've known from all around the world, and new friends that I've made on Facebook. Like, I have friends in Pakistan, and I have friends in India, and I have friends in Lebanon, lots of friends in Lebanon, or that used to live in Lebanon, and I do have lots of friends who still live in Lebanon, and I'll pick their brains. And I've made new friends on Facebook in all these countries, Saudi Arabia, whatever. Well, Saudi Arabia, I think they've pretty much shut down their internet. If you try and contact a Saudi Arabian, or even an old friend who happens to still be in Saudi Arabia, good luck. Good luck getting them to talk to you. I think they're afraid. And places like Saudi Arabia, I mean, once in a while you'll talk to somebody in China and be like, it's a strange conversation. Anyway, so, you know, the reason that I make my show is because I'm doing this anyway. I mean, every day I'm getting up and watching the news and gathering news over the net, right? And elsewhere, you know, and I hope to reach out more in person. I do reach out in person, but there's not a whole lot of people in Lexington, Kentucky who are going to help me with that, but there are, actually. There's all kinds of progressives here, all kinds of people with their own fights going on. There's sit-ins in Frankfort, Kentucky, and so, you know, I hope to get out there and cover some of that eventually, but I'm just getting started. I know I'm 2 years into it, and I'm still just getting started. So I'm really developing my ability to get out into around the United States, well, in Kentucky and the United States. Honestly, I don't have the money to be just traveling around doing news stories. I would love to be like can't think of his name right now, but he goes to Venezuela, well, like Blumenthal and people like that, people who actually work in the news industry and have somehow managed to come up with the money to go to places like Venezuela and actually be there, and so that they can give their opinions based on what they actually saw there. You know, I have to base my opinions on what they saw there. I mean, I have to dig up people who, like the Amnesty International went to Syria to report on Raqqa, and so I have to do things that way. I don't have any choice, but I do have a massive amount of experience. I was at the center of everything that happened that you guys talk about now. So my father raised the Mujahideen. He worked with Osama bin Laden in Saudi Arabia. Osama bin Laden was on the plane with me from New York to Saudi Arabia, and when I got to Saudi Arabia, I went to his house and visited with him and his brother, not knowing that it was all a setup, not knowing who he was or what he would become. And it was all because it was a setup, because my dad was working with him, and so he put us together on the plane. Osama bin Laden tried to put me together with him, probably to go to Afghanistan, which of course wouldn't have happened. But I immediately felt the vibe and recoiled and never actually went and visited with him and his brother again, only to find out 10 or 15 years later what was really going on. So my dad was at the center of that, because my dad developed the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia that of course benefits Israel to no end, right? So, sort of, in a weird kind of way. So we were there. We were in Beirut. My father was also gathering information in Lebanon to bring down the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Basically, my dad was fighting terrorism and communism, Russia, the USSR, in Indonesia, doing the same thing. He went to Brazil. He went to all these places where now you hear about everything happening. We lived in New York City, he was working for one of the biggest Saudis in the world, who was his cover when he was doing the thing for Afghanistan. Ended up in Houston, which is where everything happened, where you had the Bushes, the Saudis, the oil people all gathered together, all doing their evil crap around the world. Basically congealed there in Houston. And then finally, my dad was dumped while in Houston, and he went out on his own. And from then on, we've been free of all this bullshit until I decided I wanted to become a journalist. And now I get to talk about it all, right? Because everything I see on the news is somehow connected with that dotted line that goes down through Houston, up through New York City. You had 9/11. Who was it? Who were involved? Definitely Saudis, right? Dad was working for Saudis, who actually was the president or CEO of a Wahhabist bank that funded some of the terrorists on 9/11. So, you got all that going on. And because I was being dragged around by my dad, I was actually right in the middle of it all the time. And every time I ended up somewhere with my dad, I ended up being exposed and developing contacts and all that kind of stuff. So, of course, I find the news interesting because I was in the middle of it. I mean, it wasn't about me, but I was there. I was like in the middle of a whirlpool, that's spinning, sucking everybody down, or a tornado. So yeah, I find it all really fascinating, and that's the main reason. I just decided, well, as long as I'm here, why not go ahead and do what you love? I mean, I'm retired. I don't work fixing people's paint on their cars anymore, which I did for 23 years. So why not? Or 22 years. And why not? Why not, as long as you're gonna get up every day and basically be ensconced in the news, why not make it into something more? And that's why I decided to start, what was this called in the beginning? Democratic Party Headquarters. And then Democratic Party Headquarters News. That's when I started being a journalist. When I started Democratic Party Headquarters News. And the people who I was focusing on so hate Democrats. But they hate establishment Democrats. But it's like they refuse to accept the fact that progressive Democrats are Democrats. So eventually I got rid of the name Democratic Party Headquarters and switched to first I switched it to Progressive Headquarters News, and then just Progressive News. I mean, just to keep everybody off my back. I'm still a Democrat. I'm a progressive Democrat. Which, yes, we hate establishment Democrats. They've destroyed our party. But it doesn't change the fact that I am one. And I still back taking back the party over going third party. I'm a Green Party member. But, and my plans are, if I ever get to the point, which I doubt I will, where I just say the Democratic Party isn't worth backing anymore because we're never going to take it back, then I'm going to try and restart the Progressive Party. So, just let you know, that's my plans. I don't like the Socialist Party. I don't like the Green Party or any of them. I mean, I like them. I like them all. All they are is disinfected, real Democrats, you know, true progressives in that respect. But I don't like them in terms of representing progressives. I think we need to start our own party again. We've been very successful in the past, right up till the late, in the mid-50s, when everything got ruined by games, political games, unions and stuff. You have to read about it. I've talked about it. You can go back in my things. Progressivism from the Heart was a fairly recent one that I did just a couple days ago. You can go back to that and watch that if you want to understand what I'm thinking in terms of the progressive movement and a possible progressive party. I'm not going to make it my life, because while I consider politics very important, the most important thing, and just in terms of getting justice, social justice, I'm retired. I've done my job. I've gotten you to where you are now. You guys have plenty of smarts to get America the rest of the way. Just let me watch and let me comment. And if you want me to help, then just listen to what I have to say. I mean, it's that simple. I don't have to run for president or head of the party or be mayor or city council or anything. I don't have to do anything except for this. This is all I'm going to do, so you're just going to have to work with it. For those of you who, because there are people who really understand that I'm on top of this, man. I really am. You may not agree with some of my points of view, but opinions, but I know what I'm talking about here. Alright, so this is Martin Drummond with Progressive News. Hope you enjoyed my little rant.